In August 1963, during a dark night, a Royal Mail train was traveling from Glasgow to London. One of the train's carriages contained bags full of banknotes, worth around £67 million today, or about 800 crore rupees. The train driver, Jack Mills, was driving the engine fast through the darkness of the night. Suddenly, at a crossing, a red signal light appeared. For the driver, this was unusual because at that time and place, the signal being red made no sense. Jack Mills immediately applied the brakes and stopped the train in a deserted area. For a short moment, silence spread everywhere. But hidden behind this silence was a master plan that was about to become the biggest robbery of the century, the Great Train Robbery, in which the train itself was looted. This sounds like a story from a movie, but in real life, criminals carried out a suspense-filled plan and looted millions of pounds from Britain's government train without firing a single bullet. Everything began months earlier when some well-known criminals in London gathered to plan a new crime. Bruce Reynolds, the mastermind of this plan, started preparing a unique robbery with the help of his companions. He had secret information about the Royal Mail. This information was given to him by a senior Royal Mail security officer whose identity was never revealed. The information was that the train traveling from Glasgow to London had a special carriage called the High Value Packages or HVP carriage. On that particular day, a very large amount of money would be inside it, and that was the carriage they planned to rob. Bruce Reynolds and his partners were experienced criminals, but they had no experience in robbing a train. So they included another London gang in their plan who had experience with train robberies. This gang was known as the South Coast Raiders. Slowly, the team grew larger and more than 15 people became part of the plan. They decided to rob the government train without firing a single shot. But this was not a simple robbery where you just stop a train and steal money. Months of planning were required. On 7th August 1963 at 6:50 in the evening, the train departed from Glasgow Central Station for London. It was scheduled to reach London's Euston Station at 4 a.m. the next morning. The train had a total of 12 carriages, and 72 post office staff members were on board to sort mail during the journey. This train was specially used to transport parcels and mail to different cities. That is why it dropped mail at different stations without stopping. Whenever the train approached a station, local post office staff hung mail bags on special elevated racks. As the train slowed down while passing the platform, staff inside the train caught the bags using nets. At the same time, the mail meant for that station was dropped off from the moving train. Through this process, mail was distributed to different stations without stopping. The carriage that was to be robbed was not yet attached to the train. It was kept safely at Noonee Valley Railway Station. This was called the HVP carriage because it usually contained large amounts of cash. In 1960, the Post Office Investigation Branch ordered security alarm systems to be installed in HVP carriages. By 1961, 3 HVP carriages were fitted with alarm systems, and the older ones without alarms were kept in reserve. But on the day of the robbery, the alarm-equipped HVP carriages were out of service. So a reserve carriage numbered M30204 was used instead, which had no security system at all. This was a major tip given to the robbers by an insider from the Royal Mail. When the train arrived at Noonee Valley, railway staff attached the HVP carriage right behind the engine. This was the first tip. The second tip was even more important. Normally, the HVP carriage carried about £300,000, but because the previous week had been a bank holiday, around £3 million were being transported that day. That meant 12 times more money than usual, and at the same time, the alarm-equipped carriage was out of service. This was not a coincidence for the robbers. They had been planning for this exact day for months. At around 3 a.m., one member of the gang tampered with the signal at Sears Crossing. He covered the green light with a glove and used a battery to power the red light. When the train arrived at the crossing, the driver was shocked to see a red signal because normally Royal Mail trains were never stopped there. Jack Mills applied the brakes and stopped the train at the signal. The assistant driver stepped down from the train to use the line-side telephone to contact the signalman. When he picked up the phone, he discovered the line had been cut as part of the robbers' plan. As he turned back towards the engine, the robbers emerged from the bushes and captured him. Some of them climbed onto the engine from both sides and tried to overpower the driver. When Jack Mills resisted, one robber struck him on the head with an iron rod, knocking him unconscious. At the same time, other members of the gang disconnected the first two carriages behind the engine from the rest of the train. Their plan was to move the engine and those two carriages away from the main train. About 1 kilometer away was Bridego Bridge, where their truck was waiting. They had brought a retired railway driver with them to drive the train to the bridge, but when he saw the controls of the new engine, he panicked because he had never operated such an engine before. The robbers were forced to revive Jack Mills and make him drive the train 1 kilometer to Bridego Bridge. The engine and two carriages were driven to the bridge and stopped there. Meanwhile, the staff in the remaining carriages had no idea why the train had stopped. At Bridego Bridge, the robbers entered the HVP carriage and attacked the 5 staff members inside. They tied them up and forced them to lie face down while the robbery began. The HVP carriage contained a total of 128 bags filled with cash. These were £1, £5, and 10 shilling notes. Their total weight was about 2.5 tons. The train was on the bridge and a truck was waiting on the road below. According to their plan, they only had 15 minutes. They formed a human chain and loaded 120 bags into the truck. 8 bags were left behind because they ran out of time. Their plan had worked perfectly, but one mistake would later help the police catch them. Before leaving, one robber told the tied-up staff not to move for 30 minutes or they would be killed. The gang used an Austin Lodestar truck and 2 Land Rovers to escape. They used the same number plates on the vehicles to confuse witnesses. About 45 minutes later, at around 4:30 a.m., they reached their hideout, which was about 43 kilometers from the robbery site. During the escape, they listened to police radio communications through a VHF radio, which helped them avoid detection. At the same time they reached their hideout, the police learned about the robbery. At first, the robbers celebrated. They even played the board game Monopoly using real banknotes, but their happiness did not last long. Soon, they heard on the radio that police were searching for them within a 50-kilometer radius. The police estimated this radius based on the statement of the staff member who had been threatened with the 30-minute warning, so the police knew the robbers would still be within that area. When they heard this, the robbers panicked. They moved their plan to leave the hideout from Sunday to Friday. On Thursday, they divided the stolen money among themselves. The total stolen amount was about £2.5 million. According to some reports, each person received around £150,000, which was an enormous amount at that time. That amount would be equal to about £3.9 million per person today. The remaining money was given to smaller helpers who had assisted in minor roles. Before leaving, they wiped their fingerprints from everything in the hideout. They assigned one man the task of burning down the hideout after they left so no evidence would remain. He took the money but fled without burning down the hideout. Meanwhile, police were searching the entire Buckinghamshire area. Helicopters were flying overhead and police vehicles were deployed everywhere. The national media was in chaos over the robbery. Police announced a reward of £10,000 for anyone who provided information. A neighbor of the hideout reported unusual activity that had taken place early in August. On suspicion, police immediately raided the hideout. It was a leather-clad farmhouse that the robbers had rented 3 months earlier. Inside, police found many pieces of evidence linked to the robbery. They found empty mailbags and a truck that had been quickly painted yellow. The robbers had wiped their fingerprints from most surfaces, but fingerprints were found on the Monopoly board they had played with real money. These fingerprints became a major breakthrough in the case. They matched criminal records already held by Scotland Yard. Within days, police arrested 14 out of the 16 gang members. Only 2 managed to escape. One was the replacement train driver whose real identity was never known. The other was the senior Royal Mail security officer who had leaked the information. To this day, no one knows the true identity of that officer. He never revealed his face or his name. The court declared this robbery the biggest robbery of the century.